So there's a lot of talk right now in the MMA world that's been brought on by Joe Rogan saying that Stephen A. Smith should apologize for his comments and basically dismissing Cowboy Cerrone's performance. So I had time to think about this and kind of reflect on it. I'm not sure that that's really something that he should do. I don't believe he owes anybody an apology. Stephen A. is himself, and he's earned his spot as the top dog at ESPN by giving a raw, unbiased, and sometimes even offensive to the athletes themselves take on certain things. So
he's a character.
That's part of his style. And I get I do get the notion that coming down super hard on Tom Brady for throwing an interception is a lot different than coming down super hard on a guy that's just been concussed and knocked out in front of his friends and family. There is a difference there. However, I do think sometimes there's this notion that, just because you got in there and you were brave enough to compete in an MMA event, that you deserve all of a sudden to be praised and there can be nothing critical said about you. While it does take a lot of bravery for somebody to step in that cage or step in that octagon, take their shirt off, put their mouthpiece in, put it on the line and fight, I don't think it completely exempts them from being critiqued by a talking head like Stephen A. Smith. And I think he was just doing what he does best, trying to bring value to a commentary and be himself. He's been in this game way too long to try to reinvent himself and walk on eggshells just because it's a particular sport. Mm-hmm. So do you agree with that, or do you think he owes Cerrone an apology?
Yeah, he got where he is by doing what he does. And, it's love it or hate it. I'm kind of in between. I don't really, he did go hard in the paint on him. I can see where he came from, but I also, MMA and martial artists in general are very adamant about how respectful people should be and how there's always this, even if they're selling a fight and it gets a little nasty prior to the fight, once it happens, it's supposed to be pretty respectful. But at the end of the day, it is still a cage fight, and it is sold to us and packaged as a sport. So we should, we're talking about it right now. So people all over the internet are talking about Donald Cerrone, which in turn makes them talk about MMA more. And that's what they brought Stephen A. Smith in to do, I think, is to do Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think anybody owes anybody an apology here. I mean, these are all adults. Joe Rogan doesn't owe Stephen A. an apology, but I don't think
Cerrone's looking for an apology.
Yeah, and so one thing's for sure, we know in all of this, Donald Cerrone's not looking for an apology from anybody. So I think that Joe Rogan, as a martial artist, as a black belt, he understands what it takes to go in there. He's looking at it from a different perspective. He appreciates and understands the nuances of the sport way more than Stephen A. will, just like Stephen A. understands the nuances of basketball more than Joe does. But I'm not sure that Stephen A. could really have offered us anything different than what he offered us, which is his loud, his raw, his controversial
opinion
on a sporting event, which is what he gave. And as I said, yes, I understand that you're talking about somebody getting knocked out and violently injured as opposed to missing a 3-point shot. But the fact still remains the same, that Stephen A. was brought in to cover a sporting event. He is doing the sport of MMA largely a favor when someone of his stature comes in and takes a commentary position seriously and covers a sport that's still an emerging sport. Now, the UFC is $1 billion business, but it's still an emerging sport compared to your majors in the States, which is football, basketball, hockey, baseball, and then internationally, soccer. In that sense, MMA is still on the upswing.
Rise, yeah, I think... he's kind of rough around the edges with his takes sometimes, and that's just what he does. I think he went a little hard in the paint on Cerrone, and then I think Rogan went a little hard in the paint on him. Yeah. And, both people probably could have toned it back a little bit, but, we're talking about it. I'm pretty sure on his shows this week after, or the whole week after the fight, they've been probably talking about it at least a little bit in between the stuff. And, you know, when somebody's in a big controversy like that, usually it comes up in the topic. So
he did say, I'm willing. He said, Joe, I'm here to talk whenever and on whatever platform. Stephen A is the soundbite king. He gets on there and he chops it up better than anybody for 30 seconds or a minute. I'd be really interested to see if he's willing to go on Rogan and actually sit down and talk for 3 hours and see if they can come to some sort of understanding and mutual understanding or agreement on this whole situation, because both the guys are class acts. Both the guys are very successful at what they do,
and they like each other.
Yeah, and I think it benefits the sport to have both takes. You know, it's not everybody who follows the sport of MMA understands the level of nuance that Joe Rogan and people like Dominic Cruz and Chael Sonnen do. Some people want to just hear, man, the lights shine bright and so didn't rise to the occasion. Right. That's what, you know, they don't want to hear about positioning from guard and what he's got to do to pass. And they'll gradually catch on. If they become fans, they'll learn and they'll appreciate the art of it more. But Stephen A doing what he does brings eyes to the sport, and I think overall that's a good thing.
I think it's fair to say that he was kind of the voice for the casuals.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect way to sum it up.
He just saw something. He doesn't really know a lot about it, just like a casual. Saw it, and if fighting fires you up.
Yeah.
When you watch something like that, especially with all the hype around a Conor McGregor fight, and then you know, some people hate Conor McGregor, so all they want to do is see him lose. And then the guy that they send in to do the job for those people can't get it done. In fact, gets knocked out in 40 seconds. You're just like, you're fired up, and you want to let your anger out on
Stephen A, who's already at an 11 at all times. Anyways,
right. I
do find it interesting that I can't remember who Joe had the conversation with. It may have been Dominic Cruz or maybe John Anik, but RDC, one of the three of them. I remember specifically a conversation where they said, you know, they were basically getting themselves into the commentary world. And they asked Joe, who's the greatest MMA commentator of all time, what is the best advice that you could give me? And Joe said to them, and I'm slipping on who it was right now, he said to them, don't call what you don't see. Be honest with yourself and with the people listening and call it like you see it. And in a lot of ways, Stephen A. Smith called it like he saw it.
Yeah, say what you see, and don't try to over talk or try to sound more intelligent than you are on a matter that you don't know about. Just be honest with the people, and I think that shines through.